Hello, Tony here again. It's been a little while, so I thought I'd post another video. This time a little bit different. We are in Microsoft Flight Sim. I've been keeping an eye on the space for probably a year now since it first released. I think it's about a year. And I've finally done some instruments and panels for it. Obviously, it had a lot of problems. Air Manager has just recently, in version 4, added support for Microsoft Flight Sim, and also very recently the plugin has been improved so that we can now use LVARs and some of the events now, so much more support, whereas people were relying on the third-party software to enable some of that support to work in the very early days or along the way in that first year for Microsoft to get the support. But it's still obviously very lacking compared to Xplane for Air Manager instrument development. But I thought I'd take a look, and I did this panel a while back for the Cessna 172 G1000 version that I kept meaning to do a video for anyway, and so I spent a little bit of time and adapted the instruments that it uses and the panel script so that it works with Xplane 11 and Microsoft Flight Sim. So this is a dual purpose panel. Managed to get it to work and play nice with both. A little bit of a challenge with the lighting particularly, and some of the other features, but I'm glad to say that using Air Manager and Air Manager only, this is now the result of what we've got, and you'll see some of the functionality when I fire up the aircraft in a minute. So without further ado, I guess we should get underway. So just a quick thing before we do. Just to say about a little bit about the panels. There's not much on them. They're not a steam gauge type panel, so obviously a glass panel, so predominantly based around the G1000 with the PFD on the left monitor and the MFD on the right hand side monitor. I run two 24-inch monitors. I think I've said this before, but if you haven't watched those other videos, two 24-inch touch monitors, and the reason I do that as opposed to some that run smaller monitors is I like my instruments to be as close to real size as possible, so it enables me more screen real estate, or panel real estate if you want to look at it like that, to try and get those instruments as close as I can. Obviously there's always compromises. With this one not so much, because it's a fairly sparse panel, lots of spare space. The G1000 or any glass ethos type system does clean the panel up somewhat compared to those older aircraft, but you know, I've got lots of those steam gauge aircraft in my library, and yeah, they take up a lot more room with all the individual, sometimes, you know, 12, 15, 20 separate individual gauges, all that you need to find a home for, and so having that two lots of 24-inch screen real estate certainly helps in that regard, without sort of having to reduce the size down to something that's like really small, that I personally think loses some of the immersion in terms of the size of the instruments. It just starts to then feel a little bit more like a game than it does with the reality of the real size instruments. But that's just perhaps me. Everyone else may have a different view. I'm just telling you how I see it and the reason I went down this route. So the panels have, I think this one has 3 pop-ups. Some of my panels only have 1 or none, or some have a few more. It really depends on how the instruments sit within the real aircraft. So if they fit within the real estate of perhaps what you consider a traditional instrument panel, like we have here in this Cessna 172, then everything that would fit on that traditional instrument panel I try to place in the location that it would be in, and anything that falls outside of either the sizing or it doesn't normally fit on the instrument panel, such as in the overhead or maybe down in a console lower down, or a lower, sometimes the instrument panels are very high in terms of from the glare shed down to the lowest portion of everything, and you can't physically get the height in without squishing everything. So you have to sometimes be a little bit creative in the layout, and the way I manage to do that sometimes is I look at the functions of the instruments, and the ones that obviously you need to use all the time, you want to try and keep them on the panel, but the ones that you use less frequently or only need to glance at every now and again, or even just control at the start or end of the flight, are much less important. And so therefore I if I'm tight for space, I tend to move those off onto a pop-up. So for instance, I've got here in the top right hand corner of this left hand display a pop-up whiskey compass. I tend to do that on a lot of my panels, just only because the whiskey compass is normally not on the main instrument panel, as I was saying earlier. It's normally up either on a central pillar if the windshield has a central pillar, or perhaps on a stalk coming out the top of the glare shield, or sometimes incorporated into the top of the glare shield. But anyway, up off of the instrument panel. So not that important for this G1000 panel, but it's good as a backup reference. But it's handy for those instruments that suffer with gyro drift, or have got that modelled into them. You can compare what the directional gyro is reading compared to the whiskey compass, and adjust accordingly for the ones that have an well, the ones that drift should have an adjustment, so you can make sure that your heading is correct. So the whiskey compass is there. Down in this middle section, I've got the fuel selector. Those that are familiar with a 172 is down in the pedestal, almost down on the floor between the two seats, and so you're not going to need to access that. You don't have to swap tanks like you do in a lot of low wing aircraft. So the fuel selector hardly has to get touched in flight. You set it at the beginning and perhaps at the end of the flight, and that's about it. So this one, they're all touch enabled, so you set that to both. You make sure that the fuel shut off is on. We can turn that off while we're doing that. And then the last one down in this bottom corner is just below the normal switch panel in a G1000 172 is the ignition switch. The park brake's normally sort of central underneath the yoke, and the alternate static is on that lower panel along there as well too. So while we're here, that's the ignition panel. So let's go ahead and fire things up. We'll put our standby battery on first to make sure that it works, and it does. We'll do a quick test. Yep. Switch the main battery on and the alternator. We'll leave the avionics off. Now the one thing that they haven't got modelled in the G1000 Nxi in Microsoft Flight Sim is reversionary mode. So you'll see we've only got the PFD displayed here, but there is no engine information. There should be a EIS engine information system strip on the left hand side of the PFD here, because the MFD is not powered. So you see when we power the MFD just there quickly, you can see that engine information strip that I'm talking about there. If for instance one of the screens fails, you're meant to get, so for instance if the PFD fails, you should be able to get the PFD and that EIS strip and the little map that's in the HSI, or the inset map that you have a choice of choosing whichever. All of that should be on the one screen, so that you can still fly with one screen if one screen fails or there's a problem. So yeah, they haven't got that modelled yet, so it's a bit annoying that you have to have the MFD on as well for the start if you want to see the engine gauges. The Xplane one's not like that, but maybe that will come in time. It should be, because it's part of the feature set of the G1000. So the display backup button, it does something in the Xplane G1000, but on this audio panel at the moment, you can see the red display backup button at the bottom there. It doesn't do anything in Microsoft Flight Sim. Oh, I didn't like the sound of that. We got some rough weather coming by the sounds of it, so we perhaps better get underway. Good job we're only in a sim, eh? Okay, so we'll leave the MFD on for the moment though, just so we can see the engine gauges. We'll make sure that the mixture is full rich. We'll bring the ignition key up and Clear prop. Again, you wouldn't obviously normally do this on the runway, but it's just for demonstration purposes. So you can probably see I've put a little bit of a flight plan in. I maybe forgot to also mention that we're at St Bart's, but you probably have already worked that out. Most simmers, in fact I would say probably all simmers have been to this iconic airport and tried some landings over the hill there, down into runway 10. And so we're going to fly from St Bart's over to St Martin's Princess Juliana Airport, or at least head over that way and just have a little fly around. I'll show some features of the panel and of the G1000 Nxi on the way, and whether we get there or we don't, who knows. I shall just ramble on until I've had enough, and then that'll be the end of the video, I guess. So without further ado, let's take that parking brake off and we'll get ourselves underway. Have a stage of flaps. We'll sync up our heading. I think we'll set our altitude to 3000. And transponder is on. Let's go. Airspeed's alive. 40 knots. 50 knots. 55. Rotate. Really nice water in Microsoft Flight Sim. Obviously everybody knows that the visuals is one of its very, very strong points. Feet here, will bring the flaps up. I'm going to circle round a bit, or at least do some sweeping turns, trying to gain a bit of altitude here so I can jump onto that flight plan. So perhaps I'll do that and come back when I'm up at a reasonable altitude, and then we can join and start our flight plan and we look at some of the features of the G1000 Nxi. So I'll perhaps see you in a minute. So here we are back, gained a bit of altitude, just flying back over the island now. And you can see we're at 3,000 feet, we've just levelled out at 3,000. And so we're just coming up onto our first leg here. We're in heading mode, so I'm going to arm the nav. And you can see the GPS has come on in white on the top of the PFD here, because it's only armed. It won't actually activate straight away unless you're within a certain distance and intercept angle of the intended course. So what we'll do is we'll take our heading bug and we'll turn in towards our course, and we should see, there we go, the GPS is now flashing green, which means it's just armed. And so now the autopilot should bring us back onto our course. One of the other things, because we're at 3000 and I'll have to do it fairly quickly, you can probably see the TOD and BOD markers on the MFD there on the flight band. That's the TOD is top of descent, BOD is bottom of descent. So if I enable the, let's lower our altitude first of all, down to say 1700, which I know is the final approach fix altitude. If I angle VNAV, you can see that now VPath has come up in the top of the PFD, and you can see now it's literally just activated as we've got to that top of descent marker. So now what the aircraft will do, I'll just back the power off as we start to descend, we'll start to descend down to our flight pan target altitude of 2600 feet. You can see here in the MFD 2600 feet for the on-bed waypoint, and then by the time we get to that on-bed waypoint at the bottom of the descent marker, we should be at or around 2600 feet. And then we'll carry along on the leg to Amana and to Avaki at 2600 feet, and then as we step down to the final approach fix at Lesor, the VNAV will step us down to 1700 feet. So you can see now in the PFD the alt is now captured at 2600 feet, and the V path has gone back to armed mode, so it's gone back to white, so it's ready and waiting for the next step down. It's still saying here at the top of the PFD 2600 feet here in magenta, and you can see we're bang on where we should be with the V path market and the V here for V path. When we transition over to the approach at the very end, this was changed to G for glide path, and then we'll be following the normal LPV approach into Princess Juliana. So there's some really nice features there. Certainly helps if you're flying or you're practicing IFR stuff. Obviously there's lots of different procedures that you can go fly, and you can watch a lot of YouTube videos about people flying different ones and interesting ones. I'm always looking for some interesting ones. I watched one the other day flying in a valley, doing some S-turns, really interesting. Watching the autopilot follow the arrival and then the approach into a rather tricky location in terms of terrain and whatnot. But not a lot to see at the moment as we're flying over water, obviously. But perhaps it's a good opportunity for us while we're on this leg to just talk a little bit more about the panel. So all the switches are obviously working. I did actually forget when we took off to put the beacon and strobe on, so I've just literally put those on. But yeah, all the switches are working, the dimmers are working. I've shown the master and the avionics switches and the test function for the standby battery. Obviously the standby gauges all function. One of the things that I've not been able to get working to my satisfaction, well, it's working but it's not to my satisfaction, and that is that the standby altimeter also changes the altimeter or the baro in the G1000, which obviously is totally unrealistic. They should be independent and separate. You should have to set them both. In Xplane you can, because they have different ones that you can assign to different instruments, so you can get that functionality. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but if someone knows that it does, please let me know in the comments, and I can add that in. But I'm still going to do a little bit more digging to see if I can find a solution for that. So yeah, that's something that's it's only well, I say it's minor. It's kind of important, I suppose. But yeah, that's something that's not not quite there. The flaps and trim indicator is something we've seen in the other. Some of these instruments, you can probably recognise them, have come over from the analog Cessna 172 panel that I showed a long time ago on the channel. I think the hobs might be new, although I think I missed that on the analog panel. I think I've now added it into that. But yeah, so anyway, the hobs is something I think I knocked up for another panel, and then I realised that I had, so that's in here. So it's quite complete, this panel. And then the audio panel, of course, you can listen into the different frequencies. I've kind of got it disabled in Microsoft Flight Sim now. It's a bit annoying trying to talk and do a video and interact with ATC at the same time. Not that it's the best sort of. I think it's probably a bit better than the Xplane one, but yeah, it's still not great. It's no VAT Sim or Pilot Edge, that's for sure. So yeah, there's not much else. There's something we can show, I guess, when we get down on the ground. I've done an amphib controller as well, because there's an amphib model of the 172 in Xplane and in Microsoft Flight Sim. The Microsoft Flight Sim one is the G1000, I think, and the Xplane one, I'm not going to. I think it's the analog. I think it's a steam gauge 172 that's the amphib in Xplane, but I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to double check that again. But anyway, I've worked it all out once. So what happens with this panel is it's not a separate panel. There's some panel scripting in there that will show the amphib controller over on the right hand side here, which is where it is. And that will come on if you load an amphib model aircraft either in Microsoft Flight Sim or Xplane. So yeah, it does it automatically. So I can show that in a bit, and I can also show the night lighting. In fact, while we're on this leg, I could cheat a little bit, couldn't I, and do that now, so we don't have to do it. Let's move that time on and go a bit darker. So there we are, flying at night instantly like that. So you can see the panel, the key lights all lit up there, and you can dim those as you can the panel itself. So you can change the dim level of the key lights and the bezels and the displays themselves. The displays, interestingly enough, don't dim like they do in the Xplane G1000. Yeah, they stay fully lit and they stay fully powered the whole time, even though you shut down the aircraft and you're at night, and the dim the level. The ones in the virtual cockpit do, but when they're popped out, they do not. So I've had to get creative with that, and I've had to add my own dimming in to the G1000 display. And obviously the key lights, I think that's really nice. I really like that. It's really nice. I'm controlling this. You can probably see the little yellow highlight on the Avionics dimmer there, and it's rotating round. I'm controlling it with my knobster here. So that's a nice feature. In the virtual cockpit, this switch panel is backlit, so I may consider incorporating the backlighting into the switch panel too. Although, as I'm about to show, is that the panel one? Yeah. So there's the panel one, and which is in the virtual cockpit. The backlighting on the switch panel is what gets brighter and dimmer, but they don't seem to have any lighting control over the panel itself. No sort of like flood onto the instrument panel, which, yeah, it's kind of alright, but the only problem with that is that when you dim it right down and you're dark, it's very difficult then to the switch panel would be alright because it would be illuminated with the backlighting on it, and obviously I can dim the standby instruments as well. I'm not going to show them all, but they can be dimmed. It's very difficult then to see, not that you need to, in the middle of the flight, things like the hobs, The flap indicator is a bit difficult to see, as is the trim indicator. Yeah, the compass is on the same, I think, dim bus as the standby instruments, so that's one of the other dimmers. So yeah, that's the I think that's the pedestal one. Yeah, because that's down on the pedestal, so I've used the pedestal dimmer for that one, for the fuel selector. So it looks really nice at night, the panel, but there is yeah, that dilemma of what to do with the panel one. I tend to like to fly it sort of like this. Maybe what I can do is incorporate the backlighting anyway into the switch panel, but just link it in with that flood one, so you know, I like a little bit of illumination, so you can kind of get it to that sort of level that I've got there. So I can still see those other items like the flap and the trim indicator if you were coming into land. Obviously, it was dark. Should have my lights on here really, because we're at night. Well, you can change from day to night as quickly as that in a sim, but there we go. We'll turn that off and disable that knobster. So let's go back, I think, to day. Don't know if that was at the right time, but I kind of disabled the real time. Sometimes I do like to try and keep it real world, the settings, same as in Xplane, but sometimes you want to fly certain places and it's just sort of like, you know, when your time's to fly, it's like the middle of the night there, and you know, you like a little bit of night flying, but it starts to get you know, it's nice to do a bit of flying during the day too. So yeah, you have to get creative and change the times so you can fly when you want to fly. Same as with the weather, you know, it's nice to keep the real world weather on, but it depends what you want to do. If you want to fill in the mood to do flying in some really crappy weather, then obviously if it's not there, you have to force it on manually. Likewise, if the weather's really crappy and you don't feel like flying in crappy weather, you have to force the bright and clear and sunny, like we seem to have here. Although the weather, we did hear that thunder earlier, but it seems to be behaving itself anyway, certainly. So we're coming sort of up on Umana now, and then the legs after that are relatively short into the other places. You can see, even though we're at 26, the same. I don't know whether it should do that or whether or not that's a bug. If two legs have the same altitude like that, whether or not they would all, whether or not it would even bother putting the top and bottom of descent, because you can see the BOD there, but also just on top of it, they're kind of muddled in. It's not a T or B, because the TOD and the BOD are both co-located at the same point, because obviously we're already at 2600 feet. So it's important to say that when we did that VPath, that our target altitude, i.e. the autopilot pre-selected altitude of 1700 feet here, if that was higher than that, then the VPath wouldn't work. It has to be at the same or lower than this target altitude. So what I tend to do when I'm doing this, and I've only done it a few times, is I set the lowest of the altitudes, which tends to be at the final approach fix. In this case it's 1,700 feet, but obviously they vary. So you set the final approach fix in there when you start that VPath process off, and then you haven't got to keep stepping down each time. Of course you can if you want to. You keep a close eye on the flight pan and the altitude restrictions at the different steps. If you compare that to the actual arrival or the approach charts, you'll see what those altitude restrictions are. Sometimes they're exact altitudes, or sometimes they're at or above or at or below certain altitudes. So there we are, coming up on New Mile. Now we're going to start the turn round onto the next leg, and it's only, you can see, 6 nautical miles to Avaki, and then 5 nautical miles down to the final approach fix at Lesor. So we might as well carry on. It's probably not going to take that long to complete this flight, and then when we get down on the ground I can see if I can get the amphib model loaded up, and we'll take a look at that. So there you go, because it's 2,600 feet Avaki. You can see that top of descent and bottom of descent marker. We'll just show you that large. You can just see it there, the BOD and the TOD co-located together at that little mark. There we go, there's the BOD. And there's the little marker, the little grey circle there. At the transition point between this leg and the next leg. So we're going to turn onto Avaki. Let's zoom out a little bit, so we can, in fact, let's turn that flight plan off for a minute. We've kind of studied that enough now, we'll get to see that. So what you'll see on the next leg when we turn is you'll see a bit like at the very beginning, although that was a bit rushed because we were obviously coming out of some BARTs and getting onto that first leg, is here, because it's a bigger step down now, it's from 2,600 down to 1,700 feet, so 900 feet descent, which isn't a big descent, but it's enough for us to be able to get some separation between those top of descent and bottom of descent markers. We're flying along a bit slow here, aren't we? That was my fault because I was rambling on. I didn't put more power in when we levelled off again. I think that was what it was. I backed it off when we were in the descent and then didn't put the power back in. Not paying attention. So that will shift us on a little bit. It's probably why it's taking a bit of time. I didn't realise we were flying so slowly. So here we are approaching, and then there you go. So there's Lesor. So somewhere, well, Lesor will be the bottom of descent, which will be the 1,700 feet. This is where the BOD will be, and the top of descent will be somewhere between there and where we are currently. So we're beginning our turn now. Just interesting to see where that's going to end up. And there you go. Now that leg is activated, you can see that we have a bottom of descent marker at Lesor, which is obviously the point of where we want to be at 1,700, and a top of descent marker now here about 2/3 of the way back from that. So when we get to that top of descent, we'll turn this off now and look at the PFD. You'll see that the it's starting to come down now as we're getting closer to that top of descent marker already, and when that hits the middle here, the descent will begin and a VPath will become active and green, and then we'll have the Alt S armed again for 17, or if it was lower, obviously. It's not in this case, they're the same because now we're at the end of the approach here. so it doesn't really matter. So what we could do, I mean, I want to show you the V path a little bit more, but we'll probably find that it would actually pick up the glide path from here. So you can see V path has gone active now, green, and we're starting our descent. So again, I'll back off the power again after putting it back in earlier. And you can see we're descending down. We've still got the V path there. We're bang on there, and that's our, you can see the other little pointer here. That's our target VS speed, and it works that out over on the if you go at the if you see at the bottom of the at the bottom here of the flight plan, sometimes on longer flight plans you have to scroll down to the bottom, but you can see the VNAV profile here, so it works out how long to the top of descent. Obviously we're already on our descent down now, so this is out. I don't know why it's flashing like that. Normally you'd have a time in there to the top of descent, and then you can alter these as well, so you can change your 3-degree profile if you don't want a 3-degree, which is you know, the typical glide slope. Some approaches are steeper than that, or you can go shallower. You can alter that number if you want to. Tend to leave it in there at 3, and then it calculates these out, so you can see what that VNAV profile is going to look like. So let's go back to our main view, and then we'll just enjoy the view into Princess Juliana, and I'll get ready to hand fly her in. So you can see we're just coming up on bottom of descent now, and look at that, the autopilot does a great job at flying those feet paths. We're just almost bang on 1700 feet now, 1720 feet. Just the altitude has just been captured. You can see the V path has gone away. What I should have really done, or I wanted to really show you the full V path, was arm the approach mode. Got a bit of power back in, not too much because we are coming into land. So I've loaded up the Xplane sim, just because that was a bit easier. I know my way around it a little bit more than Microsoft Flight Sim in terms of views and whatnot. So we can. I've probably forgotten it all though. Been in the Microsoft Flight Sim, doesn't help. Really annoying, the controls are so different. If they use the same keys for different things and what, it would make it so much easier when you're transitioning between the two. But anyway, we can't have perfection, can we? Yes, the Amphib controller you can see here on the right hand side. This is based on a Whip-Air controller, who are the company that make a lot of the floats for the float planes, certainly for the Cessna, and I know that they do the Gips Aero GA8 float, and I think they may do the Beaver as well. Anyway, you can check out Whip-Air's website for all the model floats if you're interested in that thing. But this is the Amphib controller. They do this circular one that obviously fits in a normal circular 3¼ inch circular instrument hole, is designed to. But they also do like a rectangular one, which I've seen in a couple of other aircraft and some photos on the net. But this is the circular one. It's the one that's in both the Xplane and the Microsoft Flight Sim models, or very similar to it. So that was handy because I didn't actually know that at the time. Well, I made this based on the Xplane one. It just so happens the Microsoft one uses the same or very similar. So that was a stroke of luck, or perhaps I should say genius. Anyway, what we have here then. So what pops up are these additional placards and the controller itself, and these placards here. When you select an aircraft that has Amphib as part of it. So I'll fire it up quickly. So you can see there's 4, because of the floats. There's 2 small wheels at the front, 1 on each float obviously, and then the same on the back. So there's 4 little wheels. So you've got 4 lights obviously corresponding. So it's very similar to a normal gear panel that you would see with a gear up and down switch and lights to give the status. They're not all combined in the one like sometimes you see on some panels, but they have separate lights. Some panels have that, and then a pump, which is obviously part of the system to let you know that the pump is running to activate the gear mechanism, and then a bright dim switch, so you can activate the dim switch to make the panel a bit dimmer, and then a gear advisory. So this gear advisory is an annunciator and a light, so it lets you know when it thinks you haven't got the gear in the appropriate state for what you landed. So it takes into account things like flaps, I think speed maybe also. What else did I use? I can't remember now, but anyway, a few different things to try and mimic the behaviour of the in-sim aircraft. It's not 100% exactly the same because they don't make all that data available, but it's as close as I could get it, and it doesn't do a bad job. The real-world units, some of them are quite basic and they only have some of that basic functionality, but some of the newer ones, they have fancy features like rad out and different sensors to try and establish if you're landing on water or on land, and give you the appropriate gear warning depending on it. Obviously if you're landing on water you have to land with the wheels up, and obviously on land you land with the wheels down for an Amphib model. So it tries to sense that you've got the gear in the correct position, because I guess you can land on either. It's not a simple case of a normal gear aircraft where you just got to remember to put the gear down when you're landing every time. This one is a little different because obviously you've got to land on water, or you may be landing on the ground. Maybe they've got those systems because someone's actually done it. That's something I've not done. Searched up if there's any videos of float planes landing on the ground without their wheels down, or landing on the water with their wheels down. Yeah, probably difficult to capture that, but maybe there's a video or two. I'll have to have a look. Anyway. That's the Amphib controller. which I can show you very quickly on the outside view, I think. Oh, sorry, no, in addition to the amphib controller, what I shall do now is let's turn that off so we don't run our battery down, and go over to the main panel. You can see there's this water rudder handle, which also pops up as part of the panel scripting if you load an amphib model, because they go hand in hand. So this controls the water rudder. I'm going to show this in a minute. So the water rudder on the back of the floats for helping steer when you're in the water, and it's just a in-out plunger, which is just like a mechanical action. It's just done if it's pulling on a cable or what it's doing. But it's activating and pulling up those little retractable rudders that just fold up onto the top of the floats on the amphib models. The control for the water rudder is, I think, swapped between Xplane 11 and Microsoft Flight Sim in the two Cessna models. I think they're slightly different. In fact, I think in this Xplane variant it's a plunger like this, which is what I originally modelled. But in the Microsoft Flight Sim, it's more like a manual flap handle, a bit like a handbrake in a car, that type of thing, like you find in the what uses that? I know the GA8 does. Piper, I think, use it as well, don't they? Manual flap handle, you know the type of thing I'm talking about. So yeah, but the action is kind of opposite. So I think this one, when you pull it out, or that one, when you pull it up, it pushes it down. Anyway, the sense is kind of opposite. So I've kept the same control for both, but I've had to dynamically change the placard based on whichever sim is running. Not too difficult, but just another little complication. So this one says push in for water rudder, so you have to push it in to activate the water rudder. When you're in Microsoft Flight Sim, because the action of the handle is a bit like deploying the flaps, pulling the handle up, you have to pull the handle up for water rudder. So when you're in Microsoft Flight Sim, that will say pull for water rudder or something to that effect. Yeah, this is what we have to deal with the sims being different. So when you're making a panel that's got to work with both, you have to deal with all these little idiosyncrasies where they're slightly different. So what I'm going to try and do is get a view up where we can have a look at this. Yeah, okay, that's not too bad. Sorry, I need to share this with you. So there's our aircraft. If we can make that big, yes we can. Right, okay, so what we're going to do here then is I'm just going to put the power back on, and I'll show you the water rudder first. So there's so push in for water rudder. Yes, I've got it pushed in, and so you can see the rudders would be down in the water if the aeroplane was in the ground now, and then obviously you push it again and up they come. Yeah, down, up. So we'll leave it up. And then the other one, shouldn't really do this again on the ground, but we will just for a bit of fun. You can see you can bring the gear up, and then the wheels will come up, the main gear and the little nose gears there, and I've got 4 blue lights now on my panel here, and then down and back up. Whether or not it would actually work like that in real life, I don't know. Probably not. It does in the sim. Again, I wonder if there's a video for that. Sorry, I'm digressing. So yeah, that's we can probably bring that up if you want to see it in action. So you bring it up, you see the pumps acting now, and then we get the nose and the main gears lights, and then when you go down, pump activates, and you get 4 greens. So that's the amphib controller, which I think should be again. I'll see if I can give you a view of what that looks like. So yeah, there it is, just over in the right hand corner here. You can see it's got the handle, it's got the blue lights, the green lights, the pump light. It hasn't got the dim switch, but I know that the real one has got that on it, so that's why I've put it on there. And the gear advisory light. So, and the one in Microsoft Flight Sim is very, very similar to that. So yeah, that is the amphib controller, which is a nice little thing if you want to fly around in the amphib models. So I think that concludes this video really. I don't think I've got anything else to show in terms of the panel. If you've got any questions or you need any help with the pop-outs and the things, I think I'm going to do another video. I seem to see a lot of people still struggling with how the pop-outs work and the transparencies and how that works. So maybe I'll do a Microsoft Flight Sim version of that. I mean, it's pretty much identical to Xplane. I've already done an Xplane one, but maybe I'll go into a little bit more detail about the PNGs and the transparencies and how that all works with the pop-outs. I might do that because yeah, people are still asking questions about how does it work, and I can't get it. I'll get a black screen and all these other questions. So obviously it's not clear to everybody yet in terms of how that works, but it is really quite simple. And as you can see, when you get the G1000s in a panel like this, if you were sitting in front of it, yeah, you'd see it's certainly representative. And when I've got my cockpit, just got these monitors mounted in a bit of a wooden frame at the moment, and I haven't even got my yoke in there. Just got a joystick. But when I get something of semblance of a cockpit together, I'll do some more videos of the actual cockpit in action. Still got to get my throttle quadrant working, so lots of work for me to do on the hardware side. But I've been concentrating on doing panels and getting lots of panels together and messing about in the sim. So time for me to get on to do and mess about with some hardware as well. So lots of projects on the go, and lots of obviously possible content for some new videos in the future. So keep watching. If you like this video, of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as I said, any comments, just let me know. Thanks. See you again soon. Tony out.